The number one question I see in language learning communities online is, what should I watch? As input-based learners, we realize how much input it takes before you can fluently understand the language you're trying to learn. So all of us constantly need new videos to watch. We have this insatiable appetite for comprehensible input. And as someone who spent 1,000 hours of their life listening to comprehensible input in Spanish, I wanted to give my honest ranking of what types of input I found the most and least effective. What is going on, guys? My name's Nick. I'm the creator of Lengualytics and a fluent speaker of the Spanish language. As you all know, the only way to rank things online in 2026 is with a tier list, so of course, this will be a tier list video, and we're gonna rank these comprehensible input categories based on 3 main criteria. We're gonna rank them on how compelling they are, how comprehensible they are, and how easy they are to find. There's gonna be other factors that come into play, but those are the main 3. Alright, the first category is music, and music is gonna get a big fat F tier, and I don't know if that's controversial. I feel like a lot of people give this generic language learning advice, like, oh, listen to music in your target language, it's gonna be so helpful, but I think the advice is a bit confusing. I personally do think you should listen to music in your target language, but not to help you understand the language, more to help you connect with the language, connect with the culture. Because to learn a language, you have to fall in love with it first, so there has to be things about the language that interest you, and music is just one of those things you'll probably want to get into. Then when you find songs in the language you like and you want to understand, they can become motivation to help pull you further along into the language. The reason I don't think it's good input is because it's not very comprehensible. Sometimes we can't even understand music in our own language, and it's much harder to understand music in another language. The other issue with music is that songs are short, so if you want to learn a language using music, you're gonna need a ton of it. But most artists just don't have that much music, and if you're picky like me and you want to actually enjoy the music you're listening to, you'll probably end up with a library of like 50 to 100 songs you like. And that's obviously not enough material to have a substantial impact on your learning. If I had to give one positive about music, I would say it can help you form emotional connections with certain words you hear in songs, and I'm all about making emotional connections with the language you're trying to learn, because the more emotionally invested you are in what you're watching, the more you're gonna care about it, and your mind tends to better retain things you care about than things you don't. Next up is short form content, and short form content also is going to get an F. The biggest issue with short form content is that it's short. Every time you finish a video, you have to think about what you're gonna watch next. And finding more content is one of the biggest mental burdens in input-based learning. You want to find something that carries you, something long enough that you feel like you can sink into it and not waste a ton of mental energy thinking about what you're gonna watch next. If you're using short-form content, you constantly have to keep jumping around, and every jump is another chance for you to possibly lose your focus. And if you're a beginner or intermediate, all of that context switching between topics, voices, and speaking styles, it's all genuinely exhausting when you add that on top of the fact that you're trying to process a foreign language. And because of the inherent problems with this format, basically no comprehensible input creators even actually create short form content, at least none that I'm aware of. So even if you want to use it, you're just gonna have a hard time finding it. I guess if you're at an advanced level or a level where you can understand native speakers, you could kind of just doom scroll in your target language, but in my opinion, when I'm doom scrolling, I kind of just like to zone out. But when you're listening to comprehensible input, you have to be engaged. So in my opinion, doom scrolling and language learning really just don't go together. Alright, next up is travel vlogs, and travel vlogs get an easy A tier. I actually don't think I have enough time in this video to go over all the reasons I love travel vlogs, but I love travel vlogs. Firstly, you can find travel vlogs in basically every content difficulty level from beginner to native. Tons of creators do these videos, and it's probably the most popular niche or one of the most popular niches on YouTube. And I feel like you get a great mix of vocab with travel vlogs. You get that everyday colloquial vocab mixed in with vocab specific to the place the person's visiting. And because the creator is usually interacting with people when they travel, you get a nice sneak peek into how normal conversations in your target language go. Travel vlogs also give you these natural brain breaks. Comprehensible input is tiring, and if you have to watch a talking head video where someone talks at you for 10-20 minutes straight, that can be really exhausting. With travel vlogs, you get these natural breaks where the creator is showing the scenery, and you get to see a cool statue, you get to see a nice big city. It naturally immerses you and gives your brain that moment of rest without you having to pause anything. And that natural pacing can make videos easier to watch for long stretches. And finally, people who learn languages just generally like to travel, so there's this natural overlap between the content and the audience. I personally don't know anybody who hates travel vlogs. Usually you either kind of like travel vlogs or you really like them. So I feel like travel vlogs are like the glue that tie us all together. Next up is gonna be kids shows, and I'm gonna give that a C tier. I think kids shows are very overrated for language learning. I've tried them myself and I couldn't really get into them. However, the best thing about kids shows is there is a ton of content. If you ever need something to watch, you can always fall back on a kids show because kids shows are just naturally dubbed into like every language on YouTube. So it's super easy to find this type of content, no matter what language you're learning. So I'm sure if you're in a language with not much comprehensible input, you might be really happy about kids shows because that might be the only stuff you can actually even find. There's just a few things working against kids shows in my opinion. The first is that they're for kids, so the plots are not very compelling. You're gonna find it pretty hard to engage with a kids show because again, these plots are meant for children, and we're adults. Most of us. Secondly, kids shows just aren't that comprehensible for learners. People tend to think because it's a kids show, it should be accessible for beginners. But honestly, a lot of this content, in my opinion, is more like high intermediate advanced level. The voice actors are usually still speaking at full native speed, so even if the dialogue is a little bit simpler, the delivery isn't slowed down enough for beginners to understand it. And on top of that, you can't see anyone's face because these are usually cartoons. And I've always said that being able to see the speaker's face really helps with comprehensibility. On my website, Lengualytics, people tend to rate this more beginner, whereas in my opinion, it's much closer to advanced. Just because it's made for kids doesn't mean it's going to be suitable for a beginner language learner. If native kids shows were something you could watch as a beginner or intermediate learner, then I think they'd be great because content at that level is just generally less compelling, and native kids shows would relatively be a lot more compelling compared to other beginner content. But once you get to that advanced stage, you've probably already found something that you enjoy more than kids television. So at that point, there's just not a big need for kids shows unless you've run out of content and you need something to watch. In that case, again, they're always there. There's definitely an abundance, and that helps keep them in the C tier. Next up is language learning content in your target language. Grammar explainer videos, concept explanation videos, things about your language in the target language. I'm gonna give this stuff a solid B tier. If you're learning a language, then content about how your language works is going to be obviously compelling to you, because at the end of the day, you're not watching all of this random comprehensible input content to entertain yourself. You're watching it to learn a language. And for that reason, your brain is going to be locked in. You're going to eat it up. I feel like people who say you shouldn't learn any grammar, you shouldn't do any direct translations in your target language, I feel like they're leaving a lot of compelling input on the table. I feel like they must be looking at content like that thinking, oh, I really wish I could watch that. It looks so interesting. If you're leaving compelling content on the table, if you're just dying to watch some content, that's perfect. That would be hard for me to pass up because that's compelling, comprehensible input. And compelling comprehensible input is a commodity, especially in the beginner to intermediate phase. It's not easy to find. So if you find content that you're truly drawn to, I would not turn that down. In my opinion, language learning is hard enough without imposing boundaries on yourself. So I would just say indulge. Indulge in the content if that's something you're actually interested in. Next up is video games, and this is definitely gonna be the hottest take I'm gonna make in this video. I'm gonna give video games a C tier, but a high C tier, but still a C tier. And I know how controversial this is because of how much content on my site, Lengualytics, is video game content. A lot of the content in Spanish is from Spanish Boost Gaming, and they do all gaming content, so I know a lot of people love this content. The issue for me is that it feels removed from reality. I prefer comprehensible input that's more based on things in real life. With gaming content, when I was a beginner or intermediate, I always heard the Spanish and I saw the gameplay, and my mind just did not connect the two. It felt like there was some kind of disconnect for me. There's also long pauses in the content when the person is like playing the game or thinking, and of course if someone's playing a game, especially a difficult game, they can't be expected to perfectly narrate as they play. That's tough. I think putting a face cam on the screen definitely helps a lot because that definitely helps the content feel more personal. At the end of the day, most of our communication is going to be with real people in real life context, not with avatars and video video games. And you guys know I'm being honest because I literally just started a second channel where I'm doing a Pokemon Fire Red Let's Play in slow English, so I make this kind of content myself. And what I try to do is I try to have constant narration, I have a face cam in the side, I try to explain things well, and I really try to give it that personal touch. I don't think gaming content is that bad, I just don't think it's B tier for me. The only gaming series I ever finished was that game where it's a rabbit pushing and pulling things around that Pablo played. Bubba, the rabbit game. If he's a rabbit, I don't know. Anyway, that's the one series I did enjoy. That's why I have to give video games a C tier. Next up is native movies and TV shows, and native movies and TV shows are going to get an easy F tier. This stuff is just not comprehensible for learners. It's barely comprehensible for me. Native movies and TV shows, for some reason, people say to you, hey, like if you want to learn a language, watch movies and TV shows in that language. And like some people will say you should brute force it by like watching the transcripts with the movie. I think that's a big waste of time. I do not think you should be watching content that hard as a beginner, intermediate, or maybe even an advanced learner. When I tried to do this, it made me literally want to quit. It made me want to hang up the headphones for good because I thought to myself, how am I ever going to understand this language? Specifically, I'm talking about content that was made in a different country. I'm not talking about dubs, like Hollywood dubs of American movies. I'm talking about actual native productions. The speech is full speed, there's a ton of slang, there's a ton of cultural references that there's no way you're gonna get, and there's no concessions made to you for clarity. If you want a better introduction to native content, watch native content creators. Start with native content creators doing talking heads videos, then move on to native creators doing travel vlogs, then after that, maybe get to TV series and movies. But TV series and movies, that's a whole different beast. Those are very, very tough. Next up is cooking content. I'm gonna give cooking content a C tier, and it's not just because I myself don't like cooking, but that's probably part of the reason. Everybody I talk to, even if they really like cooking, they seem to unanimously dislike comprehensible input cooking content. And I'm gonna give my reasons for why I think that is here. I think it might be a format problem. Like, cooking just doesn't make good comprehensible input content. It might be because there's a lot of dead air when people are preparing the food, or it might be when people actually are talking, they're just narrating recipes, and recipe narration isn't very compelling. Those are my two best guesses. If you like comprehensible input cooking content, let me know in the comments. Tell me if you think I'm wrong here. It just seems like to me, from everybody I've talked to, people generally just do not like this stuff. Next up is Listening to Learner podcast. I'm gonna give Listening to Learner podcast a big fat B tier. When I say learner podcast, I mean podcasts that are specifically meant for language learners. I don't mean it's about language learning, but I mean they're specifically targeting people who are learning a language. I think native podcasts are still a bit too hard for most learners to follow. In my opinion, learner podcasts are like a cheat code. When you can finally put your phone down and stop having to feel like you're glued to watching content, and instead you can do the dishes, go on a long drive, go to the gym, do things that don't require your brain while you listen to the language you're trying to learn, you enter a whole new phase of language learning. It feels great. Learner podcasts are like the exit ramp away from beginner hell because you can't really use them as a beginner, but once you get to that low intermediate level, they become so useful and convenient. It's also human nature when you get to the intermediate level to want to gut check yourself and ask, am I relying too much on visuals to understand this content, or could I just understand it even if I had no visuals? And learner podcasts are a great way to test that for yourself, because that transition from visuals to no visuals can be pretty jarring. The only reason learner podcasts don't get an A tier is because you lose that visual component. That's the trade-off you make for convenience. You lose facial expressions, gestures, lip movements, on-screen visuals. All those things make input way more comprehensible. I have a going theory that hours of comprehensible input are just generally more effective if you have video to go along with them, because video really is just a natural extension of the audio. So it helps you build connections to words and it helps ground the language. But as I said, the convenience factor definitely makes up for that. Also, podcasts tend to be long, so you can sink into them more. As I've said before, finding new content just adds more unneeded mental load to your day. Next up is watching learner podcasts, and that's gonna get an easy A tier. You just take everything I just said about listening to learner podcasts and add back a visual element. Now you have the option to either watch or just listen. And here I want to talk about the benefits of having two people on a podcast. When it's just one person, speech is always gonna be a little less natural. Like me in this video right now, It feels like we're having a conversation maybe to you, but to me, I feel like I'm talking to a camera. And that's gonna make my speech always just a bit less natural than it could be. But when you have two podcast hosts, they're naturally gonna loosen up, they're naturally gonna joke around, and you're gonna get to see a little bit more of that native banter. But if it's a learner podcast, that native banter is gonna be more at a level you understand. I wanna give a specific shout out to the Dreaming Spanish podcast. I think that is one of the best pieces of comprehensible input the world has seen thus far. It's comprehensible, the topics are always compelling, the two hosts usually have a good natural chemistry, the audio quality is great, the video quality is great, it's just a 10 out of 10 production. They always keep in mind they're being watched by learners, so it's just a great bridge to get into more native-like content. So having that optional ability to add visuals just pushes learner podcast over the edge into the A tier. The next category is going to be personal talking head videos, and personal talking head videos are going to get an A tier as well. This is going to be the bread and butter of most comprehensible input channels. There's an abundance of this content out there. It's very easy to make, and they're uniquely personal. And when I say personal talking head videos, I don't necessarily mean this type of video. And this video, you're not really getting a look into my personality. You're not really becoming friends with me necessarily. This is more of an explainer video. A personal talking head video is where you're really getting invested in somebody else's life. You really feel like they're becoming a friend to you. The reason personal talking head videos work so well is because the creator is kind of inviting you into their lives, and through that process you make this parasocial connection where you actually start to care about that person. And then it doesn't matter what the hell topic they're talking about, you just want to watch because you feel like your friend is giving you a life update. Making these types of parasocial connections is great because they give you an abundance of compelling content to watch. Just like everyone else, I've watched a ton of different comprehensible input creators, and at 1,000 hours in, you just feel like you've made a ton of friends, even though none of them know who the you are. That's just 2026 weirdness. We have to accept the fact that most of our relationships are parasocial through cameras now. Whatever. Don't judge us. This is the future, guys. So you've seen this S tier category hanging out in the comprehensible input tier list, and you're probably wondering if I'm going to put anything in there, and I am. I thought this video could use a kumbaya moment at the end, so for the final category, this is gonna be something you're really, really into. Something you're personally really, really into is going to get a big fat S tier. If you can find something in your target language that you would watch even if it was in your native language, then you've just won the game. You've solved the comprehensible input puzzle. Whatever content that is for you is S tier. The kind of content that makes you forget you're actually doing language learning, that is S tier material content. All of us have different tastes, so the most compelling content for you might be super boring for me, and vice versa. That's why comprehensible input is such a personal experience. It's really based on what you want to watch. And that's why finding content you like is so important. You're not going to be able to watch thousands of hours of comprehensible input you don't find interesting. It just won't work. Luckily, we do have a website you can go to find the exact type of comprehensible input you're looking for. It's called Lengualytics. I happen to have built it. You can search by topic, by level, by creator, by difficulty, by dialect, any single thing you can think of. You can search for it on the site. You can search for duration, transcripts, all those things are available on Lengualytics for free. Check it out if you're interested, and I will see you on the next video.